Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm continuing to work on my Kidcore Candyland island, and I'm not gonna lie, I've all but abandoned this island. Literally, the last time you saw me work on this was back in the summer when I made my last video on this island. I haven't been burnt out on Animal Crossing at all. You've seen me play and talk about my experiences playing the game on my channel since I last worked on this island. I just haven't had the time to sit down and really work on a build since the summer. So as I've had a little bit more time recently, I decided to work on one of the builds I've been planning on adding in since I decided to go with the Kidcore theme, which was an amusement park with a train station attached to it. Thinking about doing this build was really overwhelming and putting me off actually playing this island, mostly because I knew it was going to be a big project and would require a lot of space that I didn't actually have. I know this isn't just a problem with me. A lot of you watching this build now will have felt overwhelmed and found it difficult to make progress on your own islands. Whether that's led you to completely giving up and restarting, or you just leaving your island off to the side whilst you do other things, it's completely normal to take a break and reflect. For me, this build perfectly encompasses that feeling because I've wanted to make it for so long, but I knew that if I didn't build the funfair I wanted, I would probably give up on this island. So when I say this build has saved my island, I'm not joking. Sometimes we need that break to step away and think about what we want and have some headspace to do other things for a bit. And working on this island now has helped me find the motivation to finish the island and work on other islands that I'm planning on making this year. If you have put down an island because you're struggling with a build, I honestly would encourage you to pick it up again and just work on it slowly and see how you get on. I spent multiple days working on this until I was happy with it, and now I feel better about my island overall. You may find you feel the same way if you just work on small parts of a bigger build to get you back into the swing of decorating. So this part you see me working on is the train station. It's not actually the first time I've made one of these. I have quite a few of them on my island that I've used as a reference for this one, but they are pretty simple in terms of construction. I've used the storefronts to create a waiting room or a small coffee place as you would typically find some small outlets on a train station, and I've used benches to create a seating area around the station itself. But one thing that you may not know is that a lot of the custom codes I used here, I've actually made myself. The train tracks and the codes which make up the platform are ones I've designed. I'm pretty new to making custom codes, and this is the first time I've created my own codes. I wanted to give it a go on this island because I couldn't really find anything that fit the vibes I was going for. There are plenty of pastel codes which I could have used for different areas on this island, but there wasn't really anything which had a childlike simplicity to it. I realised that if I wanted something simple, it might be easier for me to make what I wanted. Because I'm completely new to designing codes, they would look far more simple than some of the others I've used elsewhere, which fits perfectly in with the theme of the island. The added benefit is that I had more control over the colour scheme. So where a lot of the codes I found were a pastel pink, I was able to make something which was that bit brighter so that it would fit in better with the Kidcore aesthetic. I don't know if anyone else has attempted to make their own custom codes before, but I feel that bit more connected to this island because I've made a part of it myself. If you've made your own codes on your island and you feel the same way about them, let me know in the comments what you made. There's so many uses of custom codes and it's always fun to hear how you've used them. Originally, I wasn't planning on showing you the train station build as part of this, but when I went back and looked at the build when it was completed, I realised just how seamlessly the two fit together that I couldn't actually leave it out. I was planning on having one nearby the amusement park, but there wasn't a huge amount of space at the back of the island, so I figured it was better to work around it. As I mentioned earlier, it's not the first time I've made a train station on this island, but what made this one a little different was that I used more of the plaza items around it to make it feel like a natural extension to the park rather than it being a completely separate build. I've got the plaza arch as the entrance to the station or park depending on which way you go, but I also put down the plaza clock as well. Most of the stations I've been to have a clock somewhere on the platform to show the train times when trains are due to arrive or depart, so I decided to do something a little bit different with this train station and use the clock here. It's actually a lot cuter than I was expecting, and it isn't that jarring when looking at it compared to some of the brighter colours I have in the checkerboard platform code. Once I had the bigger items down, I then went around and added a few extra details to the build. I do this a lot when I'm working on designing an island, and I see a lot of island designers do the same. When you've placed down the main elements you want to use, you can then see what the flow is like around the build and where things need that little bit more filling in. For me, that means I use things like the triangular topiaries and the cherry blossom petal piles. I like adding a little bit of texture and colour to break up something which looks monotonous. As much as I love a good custom code flooring, if I just used the pattern and didn't put something on top of it to add dimension, it would mess with my eyes a little bit and just look a little bit boring. So adding down some greenery or small items just breaks up the space a little bit, even if it's just using some little toy ducks and dolls to indicate some passengers for the train. With the train station done, I then worked my way forwards and started the amusement park. Rather than using a custom code for the floor here, I've used the lighter dirt path instead. I wanted it to look and feel like the funfairs I grew up with, which would be in a field for a few weeks, and as a result, the grass would be trodden away by people who were making their way between the rides. There's something special about these sorts of fairs, and I remember one year when I went, there was a particular ride which spun you around on a giant vertical circle, but it threw you in all sorts of directions, and I was terrified of it. I remember all the screaming as people were riding it, and when you're a small child, it's definitely not a good look for a ride. So I mostly just stuck to the teacups and the car race tracks. Although my favourite fairground ride is the merry-go-round. I'm so pleased there's actually one in the plaza set we have in New Horizons, because it just makes this little park feel more like the ones I spent summers in when I was a child. The other advantage of using an in-game path as the basis of a build is that you can then layer custom codes on the top, which is what I'm doing with the pastel brick code. I did try just putting the teacup ride down onto the dirt path as it was, but I realised that it just looked a little bit flat, so by using a custom code underneath it, you can then give a bit more dimension and build without going crazy on items if clutter isn't your thing. That's one of the things I've learnt from designing islands for myself or for a Dream Address release. It's weird to think back to when I had my first island that I would have never used custom codes in a build. Now I use them all the time to add something a little different to an item, or just on the ground to change the look of the in-game path, or just to add a bit of texture. My entire design process has completely changed, and how I feel about my creativity has changed a lot from just working on islands in Animal Crossing. I'm a firm believer that you don't have to use all the items or custom codes in the world to make an island special, but if you want to design islands and make them look really pretty like other players can seem to do with ease, there's so many different things you can learn from. I actually did a video on some of the tips I've learned from designing islands, so if you want to get started on your first island and need a bit of help, I'll link that in the cards for you to watch after this video. Even though the park itself is pretty big, I still wanted there to be space to walk around. So where I had this empty space at the front, I debated for a while what would be small enough to fit here which would naturally fit into the rest of the build. And I realised that I didn't have anywhere to sit down. Normally in these sorts of parks, you would have a set of picnic tables which you could sit down at and enjoy some chips from the food trucks that would be there. I actually thought we did have a picnic table in New Horizons, but it turns out I was actually thinking of New Leaf. So I ended up switching this out for the simple table, which does come in pink, and I added a custom code runner to this to make it look a little bit more interesting. However, I later changed this to be the white version and used the white benches instead, as I didn't like how big the colour contrast was between the two pinks. I also switched out the custom code I used to another one that I've designed and used elsewhere on the island, which is a white and strawberry chocolate code. As much as I would have rather had the table and chairs to be pink and add a bit more of the primary colour into the build, the stark contrast between the two shades just didn't work, and as white is a bit more universal, it just fits into the build more naturally than the original colour. To finish out the main part of the amusement park, I then added in the plaza game stand and a few custom codes and flowers to fill out the space around it. I didn't want to add the Ferris wheel here because it was that bit too tall for the space and it would have blocked off the entrance to the train station, which I still want people to be able to get into on the Dream Address. As I still had the Ferris wheel and I wanted to add it somewhere into the build, I decided to fill in one of the sections on the side to incorporate it. There's this small walkway which you can use to take to the back of the train and onto another platform, which would have been a dead spot if I didn't decide to decorate it. The main focal point here is the Ferris wheel, so I just used a few custom codes and trees to fill the space out around it, and I also added in a small section for a stall with a couple of items to sell to just add a little bit more detail into the amusement park and fill out this space that little bit more. And that is the finished build. I'm so glad I managed to get this build done, and after months of putting it off, it's really helped me find my motivation to finish the island. I'll be working on some more builds on the island and sharing them with you in the future, but if you want to see how this island first started, watch this video next where I made my mood board build entrance which turned into a giant cake, and I'll see you over there.